Oh boy. You guys won't like this video, but I think it needs to be heard because I think we need to hold everyone accountable, including our elected officials. We did it to Obama, we did it to Bernie, we did it to Rand, and I think really to have a better existence in life, everyone is on target to be criticized fairly, and that's what we're going to be doing here in this video. You may not like it, but that's not my fault. Anyway, this is Luke Rudkowski of WeAreChange.org here in Acapulco, Mexico, and today I am joined by a philosopher, a free thinker, but most importantly, an amazing human being, Max Igan. And Max, unlike a lot of the alternative media, has not been cheerleading for Donald Trump. And there's a lot of issues of concern that need to be heard, that need to be addressed. And I think, Max, one of the biggest ones is Donald Trump's foreign policy, especially when it comes to Yemen and Iran. What is your take on that very important situation?
Absolutely, that is something that people just aren't looking at. You know, Donald Trump's going to a lot of effort to appease the people on the ground and fix up all the things that the people want fixed up on the ground in the United States, but his foreign policy is just continuing the same disastrous foreign policies of the previous administrations. The posturing against Iran is completely unnecessary. Iran is not a threat. It hasn't invaded anybody for the last 270 years. The only war it's been involved in is the war we pushed them into with Iraq, and even in that war they wouldn't shoot missiles into Iraq because they didn't want to hurt civilians. You know, they don't want war, they don't want nuclear weapons, they don't want any of this stuff. But Trump is just escalating this same disastrous foreign policy. You know, the situation in Yemen, the situation in Syria, he's not calling any of this out for what it is. Why is he expanding military funding and all of this when he could be reducing it and calling the war of terror out for what it is? Really, I mean, ISIS, if he says he wants to defeat ISIS, the pre-election rhetoric, we're going to join with Russia to defeat ISIS. But where does ISIS come from? It's a private mercenary army funded by DynCorp and the Clinton Foundation, all completely provable through Hillary Clinton's own emails. Why isn't he calling that out for what it is? Why isn't he not investigating 9/11 like he said he would during his election campaign? If you were to investigate 9/11, you'd find out that this whole thing has been faked. The whole war on terror is based on erroneous information. You'd be able to stop the whole thing. You know, I would suggest he should be freezing the assets of DynCorp and the Clinton Foundation, using that money to rebuild Syria and Libya. This would stop the refugee influx into Europe straight away. All these people want to go home. Let's give them homes that they can go home to rather than keep continuing to bomb their country under the pretext of defeating ISIS. ISIS is a Western-funded mercenary force, and if he's not going to admit that, then he's a player, the same as everybody else. You just got to call it for what it is.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people had hope in Donald Trump because he did say Bush knew about 9/11. He did say to release the 28 pages of 9/11. He was very critical of Saudi Arabia. And now we're seeing Saudi Arabia not even on the travel ban list, which makes no sense at all when they're the chief exporter of Wahhabism and extremism and their number one financial supporter. I don't know if number one, but the chief supporter with all of these other countries who financed ISIS inside of the Middle East. We're seeing Russian relations also up in the air. So how do you see this unfolding? What do you think is the end game, and why did Donald Trump kind of flip-flop on this major policy and now spearhead the major kind of push against Iran?
Well, look, you know, whether they've got dirt on him or whether he was just a player to begin with, personally, I think the neocons put forth a plan and it's been failing miserably. You know, people like you, people like me, we've been screaming out about this shit. They are so many miles behind schedule, so many years behind. I think Trump simply come along with a new business plan and said, hey, let's do it this way. It's all about kickstarting this war with Iran, which is going to turn the whole Middle East into a complete schmozzle. It'll probably end up in the destruction of Israel as well. And remember, Henry Kissinger said in 2012, in 10 years, Israel will no longer exist. Israel's been put there to create this instability mechanism, posture against Iran, to create this whole war of terror and just escalate the agenda. It's the same New World Order agenda. What Trump could end up doing with this is creating a confrontation whereby you end up with three major superpowers, the United States, Russia and China. That's what will be left after this, and the whole Middle East will just be a complete schmozzle to be divided up. And that's the way it seems to be going. It seems to be the same agenda, just being taken from a different approach, a different perspective. And by appeasing the American people, he can get them to rally behind him and escalate this conflict. You know, the anti-Muslim rhetoric we're hearing, you know, they're still promoting the concept that the war of terror is being run by Muslim extremists when it's not. They didn't carry out the 9/11 attacks, that they're not carrying out all of this stuff we're seeing. All of the countries that have been subject to the most terrorism in the world are countries in the Middle East. Before we invaded Iraq, there was never one suicide bombing there. Now there's been like over 1,000 suicide bombings since the US invaded. So you've got to look, Trump's just continuing this same agenda, and I think it's all moving towards the same ultimate goal.
And most importantly, an American foreign policy that is radicalizing a lot more other Islamists to become more extreme, to become more Wahhabist. Because if it wasn't for American foreign policy in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, causing this huge vacuum of power, causing this huge conflict between the sects of Islam, and this just major war and conflict, many people wouldn't be as extremist as they are now and carry out these horrible attacks that we're seeing unfold in this chaotic situation in the Middle East. So we know the game. We know it's being continued. Is there any way other than just calling it out to try to solve it, to try to fix it?
Not really. People have got to face facts. I mean, look at the foreign policy in Yemen. Look at that raid that he did on Yemen. As you mentioned before, there was the big hubbub about how one serviceman had died. There was also 30 other people who died, many of them children, who were completely innocent in that attack. And when you go and bomb these countries and you kill these families, you create terrorists. Yes. Because people want revenge for you bombing my sister and blowing up my mother. You know, I want to come and strap a bomb to myself and blow you up. That's how you create terrorism, and that's what we're seeing. Just a continuation of the same thing.
Yeah, and going after the situation in Yemen where there wasn't a sect of rebels who wanted global jihad, but the people who were fighting the people who were going for jihad. And then where was Donald Trump when he said he would work with Russia and defeat ISIS? And now the whole Russian relations are still up in the air, so it makes no sense at all. Another issue that I wanted to bring up to you, because I know this is very important, is, of course, the pedophile issues. We have seen since Donald Trump take office a lot more arrest of pedophiles. What do you see about this situation, since you've also been following it very closely?
I think it's theatre for the masses. I think it's a game to appease the people, because all the people we're seeing arrested are just low-level pedophiles. They can probably go through and rake up neighbourhoods of old men, kiddly fiddlers or whatever. But we're not seeing Hillary Clinton, we're not seeing DynCorp, we're not seeing any major people being arrested for this pedophile activity. This is a global child trafficking network that is being run by DynCorp that is happening all around the world. There's around 8 million children go missing every year. Around about 20,000 children a year are smuggled into one state in Australia. So how many children are smuggled into other places? Why aren't we addressing this? You know, the pedophile activity that's going on isn't a bunch of kiddie fiddlers messing with kids. It's a major harvesting and child trafficking. It's like happening on an industrial scale. Yeah. Why aren't we seeing any of this addressed? It's just all little players that are being arrested. And oh yes, he's doing something about the pedophiles. He's not. You know, there's a huge pedophile ring running out of Washington, D.C. and out of other major countries as well. One of the big centres is in Bulgaria. It's all going through Europe. A lot of the kids, when they go into these war zones in Syria, the amount of children that are being harvested and sent off. In Syria, there's been 15,000 children that have had their organs harvested since the war started. Why aren't we hearing about any of this? Yeah. This is all being done by major corporations. The people that are involved are DynCorp, the Clinton Foundation, NATO, the White Helmets, OTPOR, Osprey, all these countries all these organisations are involved in this, and Trump's not saying anything about it at all. So let's just call things for what they are. I think the Trump presidency is a huge opportunity for the American people to put aside this left-right paradigm, see how they're being played in this divide and conquer, and realise that if they now unite as one people and look at this man and hold him accountable for his actions, they can actually move forward. Hopefully it will provide an opportunity for people to see that there is no leader that's going to lead you to safety, and it doesn't even matter what future Trump leads you into. If you haven't changed your moral compass and you continue to tolerate this type of evil and allow for just then to bring appeasement to you, then we're just going to end up back in the same situation. We're never going to get anywhere. And if we did change our moral compass, we don't have to change anything else. The world will change around us. We don't need Donald Trump. We need ourselves, and that's what we're missing out on. This is a huge opportunity to find that. So hopefully you'll do the right thing, but I'm just not seeing it. I want to have hope in this man, but I'm just not seeing it in his foreign policies, and that's what people have to look at.
Yeah. Until I see someone like Dennis Hastert, who has already been caught within the U.S. government, being a major pedophile, being caught, a person on that kind of level, I think then we could finally get reassurance that something is happening, but we are seeing a lot of low-level kind of people being arrested. I mean, at least people will say, well, at least something's being done. But ultimately, I think the bigger problem here, the bigger issue here is a lot of people giving up their own power to leaders, trying to, and I kind of understand this mentality where they want that solution. They want someone else to do it for them instead of doing it themselves. Can you talk about the importance, because you talk about this a lot too, about coming from the heart and being able to face these things without sacrificing your power to a leader or a president or whoever it may be?
Well, yeah, that's the thing, the fact that we think we need leaders and we think we need people to move us to safety, and all of this stuff is simply appeasement. He's not really doing anything. If you're in your heart space and you don't tolerate evil, it can't exist in the world. And all of this stuff, it's just icing to keep you happy. It's not doing anything. We need to call this out for what it is, and Trump needs to call it out for what it is. DynCorp is running a major human harvesting network, and this is an organisation that was created when the CIA was created. Why isn't Trump addressing this? Why is DynCorp still receiving government contracts? If he's serious about anything, he will freeze the assets of that company immediately, and we're not seeing it. This is stuff that people need to look at. This is how you really drain the swamp. Trump is not draining the swamp. He's got the swamp. He's surrounded by the swamp. It's all swamp dwellers in his cabinet. He's replaced all of his cabinet with ex-generals. What's going on here? This is almost like a military junta that's been put in place, really, if you look at it. These guys have got all military mindsets. This is not the people that you want in charge of domestic issues. And that's what we're seeing from Trump. So it's a concern.
A lot of establishment ties, a lot of deep state ties, and of course a lot of connection also with Henry Kissinger that a lot of people seem to forget or even not talk about. And thank you so much for bringing up this important information. It needs to be known because sadly a lot of the alternative media chooses to ignore the things that they view uncomfortable, but I think we need to face them, and you're a perfect example of facing the real issues that need to be addressed, especially with DynCorp. Any other last words that you want to leave the audience with?
Look, ultimately, whatever good Trump's going to do, he still represents the state. What has blown me out is how much of the independent media is now supporting the state. They may think they're supporting Donald Trump, but Trump is the state. And if the state is not held accountable, then we're in very, very dangerous ground. And people just think this guy's going to lead them to safety. They're not really sitting back and looking at it objectively, and they're buying into the left-right paradigm. If you don't support Trump, then you support Hillary. If you don't support Hillary, you support Trump. It's one of the first elections where people actually voted for Trump just because they didn't like Hillary, and voted for Hillary just because they don't like Trump. It's quite amazing, but it was such theatre. And I was kind of surprised when Trump got in, but now when I look back at it, no, I think it was all play. I think it was all one big play. So I really hope the people of America seize this opportunity for unity and realise that now's the time. They've got to see how they're being played in this whole left-right bullshit, and they've got to step back and just look at it objectively, and they've got to hold this man just as accountable as they held everybody else, and realise that his foreign policies are really dictating what's going to go on in the ground for your country as well. If he does manage to move all these migrants out and increase the workforce and create all this stuff, I think you'll end up with the Chinese work ethic in China if you're not careful. So hopefully people are going to seize this opportunity and come together and create a better future. I mean, it's anybody's guess where we're going to go with this. Trump's a total wild card, but it's an opportunity for all of us. So let's come together on this. Stop the fighting. Stop the left-right paradigm. It's the state. It's still the state. The state is not your friend, no matter what face it puts on.
You're amazing and awesome. The link to Max Igan will be in the description below. Thank you so much for that amazing insight. Really appreciate your time.